Today I've chosen to read The Cruel Prince trilogy by Holly Black. I read The Cruel Prince a year, maybe 2 years ago. I had less than favourable thoughts when I read this the first time, but I think that's because my expectations were so high, because I really love The Darkest Part of the Forest, which is a standalone fairy novel by Holly Black. So my expectations for this being another fairy story were like up to here, and then when I read it I was like, you know what, no. And honestly, I haven't really been keeping up with public opinion of this series, so I'm going in pretty blind, especially for the second and third book. I have no idea how those were received. This book is only 350 pages, short for a fantasy, I know, and then the second and the third book gets shorter and shorter again. If anyone had told me that a few years ago, maybe I would have been inclined to pick it up. I read for like 5 minutes and then got distracted by Instagram for no reason at all particularly, so this is a verbal slap on the wrist and I'll get back to it. I'm 70 pages through The Cruel Prince now, and I remember it being split up into 2 books, but it's not equal, unfortunately. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just charge ahead and read like part 1 all in one go, but part 2 doesn't start until like 260 or something, so that ain't happening. But I'm making a conscious effort this time to pay attention to all of the names and try and remember all of the different courts or factions. I forgot that this was about twins, and I have a feeling they betray each other, which is, you know, like the worst thing that could happen. If you don't know, this follows Jude, her twin sister Taryn, and their older sister Vivi, and in the very beginning their parents are slaughtered by a redcap who's Vivi's father. Then he steals them into the fairy world, which is where Jude and Taryn proceed to grow up. They're only 7 when they're stolen, and they're 17 at the like starting narrative of this book. And Vivi has fallen in love with a girl called Heather in the human world, so she wants to go to the human world and live with her and just separate herself from fairy, whereas the twins are just full-blown human, and that is a fact that Jude is extremely caught up on. She knows she'll never be like the fairies, never like her sister, she won't fit in properly. That's basically the ending note of every chapter for the first like 7 or so chapters, so that gets a bit tedious and boring, I have to admit. Jude's story is about wanting to be a knight because that would give her some sort of claim in fairy, like she would then have respect, she'd have to be honoured, like she wouldn't be so ashamed or belittled by the fae who hate her for what she is. Because it's unsuspected for changeling children to be treated like gentry, which is the childhood and the life that Jude and her sisters have been afforded. So there's a natural tension between Jude, Taryn, and then the siblings, mostly Cardan, who is the cruel prince. He's the fifth in line to the throne, and he has 3 friends, and I kept getting their names mixed up, I think, in the first time I read it. Locke is like I think he's going to be the entry into it. He's the nice one. I think he might be the one that Taryn falls in love with, or does Taryn end up with Cardan? And then there's Valerian, who's like the vicious male. So that's a summary of the characters that we've had, and that's basically all I've got in 70 pages. They did make a journey back into the human world with Vivi to meet Heather, and that's kind of where we're shown that Jude and Taryn are separated from the human world now. They're sort of like liminally on the border of each, like they wouldn't fit perfectly in the human world anymore, but they also don't have a place in fairy. Jude is also a very unreliable narrator, so the first chapter is in 3rd person, and then it goes into 1st person, and then you get a sort of zoom out break a few chapters in where Jude's like, there are some things I haven't told you about myself. She doesn't want the reader to know that she is that she's weak.
If this turns to be a love triangle between Jude, Cardan and Locke, I'm just gonna rage quit. I can't handle that. I did not sign up for a love triangle.
I realised I should probably update, as I'm now 150 pages through the story. I'm reading it quite slowly. I guess my reading tolerance has been completely knocked down, so I can't actually read that many pages before I need a little break. I don't know whether that's necessarily the book itself or just my aptitude for reading has just depleted a little bit. Jude has now sworn herself to Dane, who is like the High Prince. He's first in line, or no, 3rd in line.
But I'm making a conscious effort to pay attention.
And she has decided to become his spy. She is going to gather intel for the other throne potentials. And I think there's something's happened with Cardan as well. Like, he keeps trying to embarrass her, betray her, humiliate her, and she keeps fighting back as she said she was going to. And as long as she does that, then she has a tiny weeny little bit of power over him. As for her training, I've just got to that bit. So Dane has 3 other people in his spy arsenal. So the Roach, the Ghost, and the bomb, and they all have different specialities that they're going to teach her so that she can be the best. And then I think eventually she'll get like a nickname like that as well, so she can be the something. What else has happened? Oh, the sister. Yeah, Taryn has also declared that she's in love with someone and someone intends to marry her, so that's her goal all along, and I'm pretty sure it's Locke, and that is why Jude feels betrayed, because she kind of likes him too. So the romantic elements have certainly come into the plot now, out of nowhere. So she's running away after attacking Valyrian, and then Locke sort of comes in to save her and takes her to overlook Fairy, and they talk a little bit about the human world, and then suddenly they're kissing, and I'm like, we've had maybe 3 scenes to foreshadow this of them even acknowledging each other, and we're kissing now? And they're already saying things like, I like you, I tell him, I like playing pretend with you, and then he's like, pretend? You kissed 5 minutes ago? You're not in love, please stop. No, I'm not a huge fan of romance. I think especially when it comes out of nowhere. I really like the old slow burn, you know? I'm only 160 pages through, and I don't believe in their connection enough. I have a particularly nasty spot, and I don't have makeup to cover it, so please enjoy this Yoongi sticker. I've moved on to day 2 of reading the Cruel Prince series, and we're this far through it, so we're not doing great for our original day plan, but I'm enjoying it, and that's the main thing. I'm going to try and finish the rest of this in one go, which I think perfectly fits the promising myself lofty expectations and not meeting them, a theme that has inexplicably happened over the last few days. So I'm on page 218, I have it in front of me now. I should note that it's been several days since I read this, and the first thing I read is, I bury the body. And it's like, what? I completely forgot that she killed Valyrian. So Jude's at a dance currently, and she's just had a little swing about with Locke, and then Cardan cuts in, and they have like a little bit of an argument that's charged with tension, and Jude is 100% the kind of person in an argument that would be, ooh, you want to kiss me so bad. Turns out I didn't have to remember so many fairy names after all. More than half of the royal family is slaughtered in one night. So I suppose this is why it's called The Cruel Prince, rather than anything to do with Jude, because the point is about the coronation, and there's a coup, and the person that Jude has allied herself with, Dane, is murdered brutally, and so Baelkin wants to take the throne, but he needs to have one of his kin crown him. He refuses, so his wife is murdered, and then he's murdered, and then it goes to one of his sisters, but she's murdered by one of Dane's spies, and then the other sister, who was Vivi's best friend, decides to kill herself rather than take on that thing. So it's only Cardan left. He's the only person that can crown Baelkin legitimately, and if he's not crowned legitimately, then people ain't gonna follow him. I'm finally on to book 2, and I have to say, I am enjoying this a lot more than when I read it the first time. I still don't think it's really living up to the vicious standards that I was expecting of Cardan being the Cruel Prince. It still seems very like playground bickering, and I imagine that will escalate later on. Spoilers for myself, it comes to nothing. I think I'm right in remembering that it's Locke who Taryn is sort of like engaged to, because he's going on about betrayal, and obviously it is his betrayal as much as it is hers, so I'll be really annoyed if she's taking it all out on her sister, you know? Oh no, I'm actually invested. I'm actually really enjoying it. Yikes. How did I read this the first time? There's just been, the second book is just it, really. Like, there's just so much death and intrigue. So we have the big coup, basically all the royal family are dead, and then she discovers that Locke was with Taryn, and it's sort of revealed how Cardan knew about this all along, and they were making fun of her, and she was taking Taryn's punishment because Taryn always wanted to be like them. Anyway, it's all lining up, the motivations are there, it's very, very satisfying to see, and we're really seeing Jude become this like villain character, because she challenges Taryn to a duel, and then she's about to slice her in half when Vivi like enchants them to stop, but then she knows, and she can't unknow the fact that she was about to kill her sister. So I think that's going to have some devastating consequences later on. Lol, it comes to nothing. I like the fact that Dias's League of Bandits, his spies, are like still working together to do something, and I think they're just taking Jude now as their sort of unofficial leader. I couldn't go as far as to say that I like Cardan, because I don't, but he's suddenly more intriguing, and I couldn't exactly tell you why, but I don't want to question it. I kind of just want to read and enjoy it. So I finished The Cruel Prince. It was so good. Like, when I said book 2 was it, I didn't realise quite how it was. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. The stakes were high. There were so many plot twists and things I didn't see coming. I really liked how all of the dynamics were explained, as I said, just so satisfying. Like, even the fact that they were twins came into play. Book 2 was masterfully done. Like, I would say the beginning, too repetitive, not fast enough. Like, the build-up is very weak, and the characters themselves, I don't want to go as far as to say uninteresting, but it gets better as they realise their purpose. Like, you can see Jude slowly changing into the person that she becomes later, even though I feel like it happens quite quickly in the scheme of things. Like, suddenly, as soon as she becomes this spy, she sort of knows what she's doing, but she sort of explains it away by being like, well, I am Maddox's daughter after all. I think I was just turned off by the politics of it the first time I read it, perhaps. Like, I just wasn't paying enough attention to all of the players in the game, so my understanding was skewed. But it is very different to what the title would suggest. Like, Carden is a different character, but I love the ending and the way that, like, he is bound to Jude for a year and a day, and she manages to get him on the throne, basically. It's kind of like she tells everything one thing and then keeps the true thing to herself, so it's a surprise even to the reader what happens, which I thought was so effective and really well done. I'm intrigued by the fact that the third one is called Queen of Nothing, because at the very end her nickname as part of the spies becomes the Queen. Because she's essentially like the kingmaker now. It wasn't as bad as I thought, the separation between her and Taran, because honestly, we didn't see them being that close to begin with. So I think because this time I couldn't be invested in more than the idea of twins, because in my head, twins are just like naturally connected and really close with each other, because that mirrors Maddie and I's own relationship. But these two, that's not really the case. So any sort of sense of betrayal didn't feel... It sounds horrible, but it didn't feel too bad, or it didn't feel like it had that twin layering. It just felt like it had a friend layering, because the whole twins thing may have not have even mattered. I spent the whole morning editing this video, and now it is time to move on to the Wicked King. In her new position as basically puppeteer for Prince Carden, now that he's High King, she goes to visit Baelkin, who was obviously the guy that murdered half of the royal family, and she meets a fairy woman on her way down from visiting who says, "I knew your mother and all her little secrets." I like that little nugget in here. I hope it's followed up later on. Lol, it comes to nothing. The other important thing to note is that Locke has demanded that he be master of the revels for Carden, and that means that Locke is going to be around more, so Jude is going to have to deal with her feelings that are all caught up with him and her sister. Spoilers to myself, Locke doesn't stick around for long. She's also longing to reconnect with her sister, which I think is a nice touch. That even though they're fighting, you get the sense that it wouldn't take much actually to bring them back together, but she just doesn't want to be the one to go first. I am now this far through. Still not at book 2 yet, hopefully not a long way to go. So what has happened, you ask? Jude has gone to the human world in order to collect her sister Vivi, Vivi's girlfriend, who doesn't know that magic is real and that fairies exist, and Vivi is in fact one of them, and also Oak, who I don't know if I really explained it in the last book, but is kind of like the hidden heir to the fairy world. He's been sent to the human world to sort of protect him until he's old enough, because at the moment if he became king then he would just be ruled like through a regent. So it's better if he assumes the throne when he has the capabilities to do so, and like Jude's whole plan with that is have Carden on the throne and she's the one to control him. Although I'm like, what benefits have you reaped from doing that so far, really? Like, we haven't honestly seen her exert that much control over him in his decision making. This book is heavily focused on the undersea, which is like another realm of fairy, mostly for like the water-based fairies. There's some sort of siege that's going to happen. The water people are going to have a fight with the regular like land fairies, unless they potentially marry up their two heirs, so that's Carden. And very coincidentally, one of the girls, I literally can't remember her name, it begins with N, who was from Carden's original crew from the first book. And turns out she's been in love with him this whole time, and now Jude's getting a little jealous because she likes to repeat that. Honestly, I feel like I could flip to any page and I'd fall on a quote of her saying the bit where Carden says to her, like, "Kiss me until I'm drunk" on it. She sure does like to remind the reader that he said that. Just give me a moment to forget, would you, Jude? Honestly. In all honesty though, like, I am still enjoying it. It doesn't sound like it, but I am. It's good. Just like book 1, I'm hoping that book 2 is where the real like meat and potatoes is. I feel like we need to get to some more conflict because it's been lacking. And then who knows what the third book is about. It's shorter, again, which I'm literally obsessed with. Just as I suspected, the ending to book 1 was very juicy. So it all culminates in the wedding between Taran and Locke, and we've really turned Locke into the bad guy now, considering he sent a sort of revel party to kill Jude. And the plot with the Undersea has again had a beautiful twist that I didn't see coming, in that instead of trying to get Oak as an heir to the throne, the Undersea have targeted Baelkin. I'm kind of annoyed that I didn't see that one coming, because it is a similar twist to what happened in the first book. I enjoy that it fooled me. I'm moving into book 2 now, and there was also a nice betrayal as well, which I would never have seen coming, but it makes perfect sense, and that is that the ghost betrayed her by working for someone else, because technically he was never working for Jude, he was working for Dane, who was the slain prince. So again, that's a nice little, Jude is naive, thinking that she's got the upper hand, but really she's got nothing and no one. So we're doing it. We've made it. It's finally time for Queen of Nothing, the final book in this series. I've realised that my anger with this series is not to do with the series at all, but how long it's taking me to read it. So I'm actually really enjoying myself. I thought the ending for Wicked King was amazing. I finished it last night. It's just so good, with betrayals, and then finally Cardan was living up to this Wicked King, this cruel prince persona that we've been led to believe he has, and he did something that even Jude didn't see coming, and it was so good. It was such a good ending. Like, the idea that she's forced back into the human world is so convincing to me, because that's such the strange thing about this whole series, that the human world is literally just on the edge. She could leave at any time, but she's choosing not to because she's completely enamored by the idea of magic. So now to see her in the place that she desperately doesn't want to be is exactly what she needs to have that like fall before the rise of the end. And we also understand now why it's called Queen of Nothing, because at the end of the previous book, Cardan proposed to her and they got married, so that makes her like queen of the fairies, but it's only the two of them that know that. And then she gets exiled, and it's just like, oh my goodness, the tension was so good. I'm also kind of believing their love story a bit, which I hate myself a little bit for, but that's what's happening. I'm just going to accept it and go. I read 50 pages of Queen of Nothing last night because I could not stop myself from starting it after I finished the second one. I needed to know what happens next, and she hasn't made it back into Fairy yet, but she's finally got to the plot where she could be. So she has a few little escapades in the human world where she's running essentially errands for other folk that live in the human world. Then she acquires some information, if you will, about what Cardan has been up to while she's been away, and then Taran comes to say that she's killed Locke. I don't know whether to believe her in that, but it's the perfect foil for getting Jude back into Fairy, because they're obviously twins and they can do a little switch, and because Jude cannot be compulsed in any way and she still has the power to lie, the plan is that she acts in Taran's place so that when they put her on trial she can be like, no, don't know anything about this. I'm really pleased that like they're not just twins for no reason. Like, the twins has been relevant to the plot multiple times. So Queen of Nothing, 300 pages, let's get it. One trope that Holly Black seems to rely on quite a lot to transition between scenes to add tension is that Jude just gets knocked out and then she wakes up somewhere completely different, which is a convenient location change for her often enough. Like in the second book, that is how she ends up in the Undersea. She's just knocked unconscious and then she wakes up underwater. And I don't think I really mentioned that when that was happening, but that was weird. She's breathing underwater completely fine as a mortal, which made me think, like, can anyone just do it then? Is anyone under the sea glamoured to be able to breathe underwater? Can all fairies have this power? Like, Asia has like a mermaid siren form, but then she can also just have legs regularly. So I think the power of the fairies under the sea like wasn't explored that much, and like what makes them different to the folk of the air, which I've now just this very second remembered is what the earth fairies are called. And then I didn't really talk about her time under the water very much, and how it plays a lot into Jude being an unreliable narrator, because she's manipulated into swearing her fealty to the Undersea Queen, but because she's already been put under this loyalty thing, which means she can't be glamoured, it's all just fake. So she's acting one way even though the fairies think that they are tricking her into doing that. It creates some interesting narrative gaps where Jude's not telling you exactly what she is doing when she is being forced to do stuff, because it's all part of this glamour on her. And that's mainly all in the subtext with her relationship with Baelkin, and potentially like abusive and non-con it is. So we've been spared on the page representation of non-con, but definitely it is there, undeniably, in the things that she's done. So back to this book, but Baelkin's dead now, so that has put an end to his abuse, obviously, thank goodness. She's just been knocked over the head and taken somewhere else. So the context of it happening this time, we know already that she is disguising disguising herself as Taran to get into the fairy world again. She gets an audience with the king, and obviously Cardan realizes right away that it's actually Jude, but he doesn't let that on. So he manages to manipulate the situation so that Taran has to go back with him to his room, and then a plot comes forward that she's going to be rescued by Maddox people, and so they storm in, knock her unconscious, and I don't know whether it's been confirmed if they've harmed the king or not, but she's been knocked unconscious and then she wakes up and she's suddenly in Maddox's stronghold, acting as Taran once again, because her family can't tell them apart. There's just been so much death in all of these books, like loads of characters just gone, but then like it hasn't really affected anyone in the immediate circle of main characters yet. Is Cardan gonna die by the end of this series? Should I just predict that now? Would I be happy with that? Do I want to see them get together though? Because I kind of do. Jude and Cardan, that is, because the chemistry is there.
Surprise, surprise, she's passed out again.
It's done. I've finished the series. Queen of Nothing. I think it was a good end to the book. I was very confused that like they have sex and then the next scene he turns into a snake. I guess this makes sense now, but wow, of all the things I would have expected to happen, that wasn't it for sure. But then there was like no conflict to it. Like obviously it led to the wars basically between everyone. In terms of getting him back into being, you know, his human body, it wasn't any more complicated than they said it was going to be, you know, like kill him and he'll return, and he did. There wasn't like some big quest. Jude's gone through enough, so I can appreciate that getting back to the love of her life being as easy as it was. I'll just accept that as fine. Suffice to say, I did enjoy this story. I think it was a lot slower than the first two books, and I think actually the first half, book one of this, was my favourite, even though for the other two I like the second half of the books better. They're just really wonderfully crafted, makes me firmly believe that no fantasy need be any longer than 350 pages. I think the biggest feat of this series is that I did actually enjoy Jude and Cardan by the end, even though I didn't particularly care for either of their characters to begin with. I felt like this book perfectly used the human world as well, and like this portal fantasy that is the most intriguing part of fairy world, that it's literally like liminally on the edge. The ending may have wrapped everything up a little bit too tightly in a sweet little bow, which I was surprised at, that like, I don't know, none of the main characters died. Like even Maddox managed to come out like unscathed relatively, and you've got this sort of like perfect little human life that they can also dip into as well as being king and queen of fairy. But to be honest, I don't really have that many thoughts on this book. Like I thought it moved at a nice pace. It was focused on the romance quite heavily, which was totally necessary after like them not really spending that much time together in book 1 and 2. I just can't believe I enjoyed it so much. Like maybe it's because I haven't read young adult fantasy in a long time. I haven't read fantasy full stop in an even longer time. This was just like a delightful, whimsical, slightly bloody like way back into it. What am I going to take away from this? Give things second chances if you believe you know, may have been wrong. I would even go as far as to say I would read another book about these characters, which is huge. They're escapades in the human world. Give me that story, please. Very satisfied. The bad guys died, the good guys won. I'll give some star ratings, which is so arbitrary and basically meaningless, but we'll do it anyway. So I will split each book up into their halves of book 1 and 2. So book 1, part 1 is a 3. It's a 3. Part 2 is a solid 5. Book 2 is a solid just 4 all around. Then this one, part 1 is a 4 as well, and then maybe part 2 is a 3.5. So overall this series gets a 4-star rating from me, maybe even a 5-star. Parts of it 5. It's a 4 or 5, okay? We'll go 4.5. Being indecisive about a star rating as if it means anything. Thank you so much for watching my review, as off track as it got in certain points to my dedication to it. But I really enjoyed this, and if you also enjoyed the series, please talk to me about it, your favourite characters and stuff. Like, can we appreciate that even, like, the 3 spies got a nice little bow of resolution? Like, none of them died. How could none of them die? Anyway, also, have you ever reaped the rewards of giving something a second chance? And now it's got me thinking about other things that I may revisit in the future. I'll see you next time. Bye!